A little too casual. Kind of formal. Alright, that'll do for this video. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, welcome to Sir Psych, and today I've got an important question for you. Who are you? Or more importantly, who do you think you are? Today we're going to be talking about a psychology and sociology concept known as the looking glass self. And the basic idea behind the looking glass self is that every person that you interact with has their own subjective interpretation in their mind of who you are as an individual, which is to say that a different version of you exists in the mind of every person that you interact with based on how they interact with you and the relationship that they have with you as an individual. The most basic way to explain this concept is to imagine that there's four people in front of you. One of them is a parent, one of them is a teacher, one of them is a friend, and one of them is a lover or somebody you are in a relationship with. So, starting with the parent, imagine how your parent sees you compared to, say, your friend. There's usually a difference here because we interact with parents in a different way than we interact with a friend. We usually have a more unrestrained personality when we're talking with a friend, for example. At least most people. Some people will have this type of relationship with a parent. But the general idea is that there's usually a different version of ourselves that we present to people in our lives based on the relationship that we have with them. And therefore, they see an entirely different version of us in their own mind. So your parent might think, oh, I have such a good child because they act well and they never talk back, but little do they know you could be off doing crazy things with your friend when your parent doesn't know. Your teacher is likely to judge you based on your academic relationship with them, how you're performing in school, how you act as an individual, the level of respect that you show. So say, for example, now we look at your friend. Your friend is again going to have that unrestrained version of yourself. You might think this is the closest to your kind of true self, your true personality, because this is the person that you don't feel like you have to hold back with. Now, let's go over to the lover or the person that you're in the relationship with. This is a particularly interesting looking glass self because this is the one where we might find ourselves trying to be better than we actually are as individuals or trying to go past our normal limits of how we would act to appear better than our average selves to this person. So say, for example, the looking glass self that your partner might see when they look at you is somebody who is a better version of maybe the normal you that you currently are in life because you're trying to be better or do better for this specific person. There's also another critical looking glass self that people tend to forget when they talk about this concept, and that's the looking glass self that we have of our own self, of our own personality. When we look at ourselves, we do not have an objective view of our own personality. When we think to ourselves, this is the kind of person that I am, it is usually not a perfectly accurate representation of the kind of person that we are. Some people who are fully developed and mature might have this kind of reflection of themselves, but even then it's usually not perfect. So why is it important, and why is it important to kind of know that we may not have this perfect reflection of ourselves? Because when we think of the us that we truly are, we usually struggle to kind of balance this self-perceived self with the looking glass selves that we show with other people. Because usually we have personality aspects that we don't want to show certain people, or we want to show certain people, but maybe we have a tough time doing so. It's important for us to kind of learn which of these traits we can show and can't show when interacting with specific new people in our lives. The more you spend time with people and the longer you get to know someone, the easier it becomes to balance the looking glass perceived self that you have of yourself as an individual and the looking glass self that you want others to see when they're interacting with you. For example, I as an individual have a looking glass self that I want to present when I'm on YouTube or I'm using some sort of digital medium. I want to appear professional, competent. I try to, do my very least to make sure that I'm at least wearing semi decent clothes. I'm not in my pajamas, for example. It's important for me to appear competent and professional when I'm on my YouTube channel or presenting myself to certain people. That's the looking glass self that I believe that other people see when they're looking at me, and the one that I want to present to them. Is this a full representation of my own individual personality, the personality that I believe is truly reflected when I'm not on YouTube or presenting myself in such a way? No, usually outside of YouTube, for example, when I'm by myself, I'm a much more quiet person. I'm relaxed. I spend a lot of time doing relaxing things like playing video games, listening to music, these types of things. I'm not always in this kind of talking and explaining type of mood. This is just something I do when I get on my YouTube channel. But this is the version of myself that I want to show when I am on YouTube. The same can be said when I'm interacting with my wife, for example. When I'm interacting with my wife, I'm usually far more relaxed, laid back, and I can be sometimes even a little bit silly or goofy, which is not usually a true representation of what I think I as an individual am like. But that's the kind of relationship that I have with my wife. It allows that side of me to come out. But that's not a personality aspect that I would attribute to myself in a normal situation outside of interaction with her as an individual. And that's the importance of the looking glass self, is that when we interact with certain people, our own personality traits can change and how we perceive ourselves and individuals can change in certain interactions with others. Now, the looking glass self can actually be something that is sometimes it's a two-way street, or sometimes it's a positive one-way street or a negative one-way street. So, what do I mean by this? So, when there's a looking glass self that is a two-way street, it means that you're presenting the kind of self that you want to be seen as to another person, and you believe that other people see you in that way. That's the two-way looking glass self. The positive looking glass self is that you're presenting yourself to another person, you want to be seen as a certain way, but you're not exactly caring about what they think of you as an individual, and you might just believe that they see you in that way, regardless of how they actually see you. It's not exactly a two-way street. The negative one-way street when it comes to the looking glass self is that you might believe that other people see you in a way that you don't want to be seen as, and you don't think that you as an individual have control over this. This goes back to a topic I talked about a few weeks ago, the locus of control idea, which is to say that some people have a more external locus of control and they believe that the world impacts them as an individual more than they believe that they as an individual impact the world. People who have internal locus of control, they believe that they have an impact on their external world, usually believe that their looking glass self is them presenting some sort of thing that they want to present, some sort of personality or personality aspect, and that other people are generally going to believe this. People with an external locus of control are usually going to believe that other people see them in a specific or certain way, and they don't have a whole lot of control over this, or they believe that they don't have enough control over themselves to change this. The idea of social anxiety, or even just kind of general neuroticism as a personality trait, is a lot of times related to this looking glass self that others believe that others see them as. A lot of people who have social anxiety kind of have these negative interpretations of how other people are viewing them, and they may not believe that they can change this interpretation through their actions, or they're too nervous to attempt to change it. It's important when people are interacting with other people to recognize that a lot of the times they as an individual can change how others perceive them, and they can make their own changes within their own personality and actions to become someone who is different or more representative of them as an individual than they believe that they currently are. And this is something that they attempt to do when they're doing identity therapy and these sorts of things. You want to allow people to be a more authentic version of themselves so they can show this to other people, and then they can receive that kind of two-way street looking glass self. And once they receive that kind of positive feedback on their own presentation of the self they believe that they are, they're usually going to feel more confident and more unrestricted when it comes to presenting the self that they believe they are. A lot of times, some of the biggest changes that are going to impact a person's life are going to come through identity development. And this is to say that when somebody has a perception of themselves that they believe is so drastically different from the self that they actually think that they are or they should be, this can usually cause massive personality changes and actions, behaviors, things of that nature. This is often the reason why people have things like midlife crises or other kinds of things. One of the things that we see when we look at identity development, and one of the things that has been most researched in the past 20 years, for example, is trans development. And we know, for example, that a lot of people who are on the trans spectrum have difficulty with identity development, or they struggle when they're transitioning, things of this nature. And this is because it's really hard to just change your personality or change the perceived self, and especially it becomes more difficult when you do change this and you feel like you are a more authentic version of yourself, but other people are not giving you that two-way street that you believe that you should have. And this is why it's so difficult for trans people, for example, to find a healthy balance between perceived self and looking glass self that others perceive them as. So identity development is something that is really difficult for a lot of people, and if it's something that is not properly measured, maintained, or balanced in people's lives, they're going to have a lot of difficulty finding themselves and finding what they want to do. There's a specific time of year, historically and symbolically, that most people go through major identity changes, and this is actually New Year's. And the reason for this is because New Year's is kind of a abstract representation of a fresh start. It's something that we believe as an individual can represent a new beginning. And that's why people will often set New Year's resolutions and these goals at New Year's to attempt to become somebody who they believe that they currently aren't, but they should be. If it was just a goal that people wanted to achieve, it would be something that they set throughout the year. The timing would not matter. But the reason people wait for New Year's to attempt to go through these major New Year resolutions and changes is that because they believe that this time of year represents a kind of budding, a chance for them to change their personality, change themselves, and become something new. And this is important in identity development because when we look at these times of years and these special periods in people's lives, this is actually the time when they can go through major personality developments because they have an abstract reason in their head to allow themselves to have this change without just doing it. As a psychology graduate student who works in personality development, coaching, things of this nature, I always tell people that if you believe that you're drastically different from the self that you believe that you truly are, you should attempt to take steps towards being that person. But the most important thing that you can do is attempt to take steps. Because I don't think it's a good idea to make drastic, kind of huge changes in a short period of time when it comes to your personality. Our personalities and how we perceive ourselves and the us that others perceive us as is extremely fragile. And people don't recognize this when they make these huge identity leaps because it's hard for the looking glass self in other people's minds to immediately change. It's hard for other people to see you as somebody that you weren't in a short period of time. And as much as we wish that was the case, it usually isn't, which is why it's better for people who want to make drastic personality changes to do so one step at a time. But this is also something that is important for people just for their own mental health. Because if you make these drastic personality changes and then you find that you're not able to keep up with these changes, it becomes more difficult in the long term and more difficult on your mental health to attempt to keep up this facade if you don't have these steps and the tools to make sure that you're able to be the person that you want to be. So if you're going to make some sort of large term personality change, consider doing it gradually over the course of a few months. Make sure that you're not going to be rushing into this or trying to change yourself all in one go because it's going to be difficult on your own looking glass self, but as well as the other people who care about you who are going to be confused by the different version of you that they've seen that is not representative of the you that they've known for a long time. And for some people, this is okay. They're just going to say, okay, well, get rid of the people who don't see me as the me that I want to be. But realistically, this isn't a healthy mindset because it is, as humans, we see other people in a specific way because of this personal, subjective relationship we have with them. So it's important to allow people to understand the reasoning behind your change if you stop and explain to people why you believe that you're different than the version that you were yesterday. If you're somebody else, if you were someone who's timid, but now you want to be confident, or if you're somebody who's extremely confident and aggressive, but you want to calm down, these are changes that can be made and can be made slowly over time without kind of scaring off everybody who you are interacting with. They're not going to be seeing this drastically different version of yourself in one day. And allowing yourself to have these gradual changes over time is going to allow the environment, the micro and macro social systems that you interact with to better adapt to the individual that you want to be. To give a small personal story and kind of example of how a drastic transition can be confusing for other people, a lot of you may remember me talking about the idea that about 4 years ago I weighed 300 pounds and I lost about 120 pounds. So that was something that I actually did as a New Year's resolution. And now that I know that that was kind of me seeing my looking glass self and not being the person that I wanted to be, I made this huge drastic change. And I lost a lot of that initial weight in the first 2 or 3 months. I was practically like starving myself because I was so dedicated to becoming this person that I wasn't. And it was difficult for the people who knew me and the people who cared about me to see me in such a way because I was constantly focusing and dedicated on achieving this one particular thing, losing the weight and becoming a healthier and better version of myself. But people on the outside who didn't see my mindset weren't able to easily grasp this. So I had people constantly coming up to me and asking me, am I sick? They're worried about me? Is something wrong? Are you depressed? These sorts of things. These were constantly questions that people were asking. And you can see how even when somebody is making a positive and healthy personality change, something that isn't even that drastic, just losing some weight, it can really confuse the people that you're interacting with because they're so used to seeing that looking glass self that they have usually interacted with that they don't know how to interact with this different version that just came out of nowhere. So that's why I think it's important if you're going to make these kinds of changes. Yes, you can do it drastically, but I don't think this is necessarily an issue all the time. But I think it's better and more healthy to attempt to take slower and more gradual steps to becoming the person that you want to be. Because then you can find that maybe if you take a few of these steps, and you're not exactly the person who you thought you were, and some of these steps aren't representative of you as an individual, then you can take a few steps back and it won't be as drastic. If you take this huge leap to become somebody that you're not, and then you expect everyone else to believe that you're now this person or you're acting this entirely different way, and then you fall back on that later, it becomes even harder because people don't know what to believe or how they should interact with you as an individual. So I think it's important, if you want to make drastic personality changes or changes in your life, attempt to do it in a slower, more gradual way. All right, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on the looking glass self, personality development, identity development. I had a lot of topics kind of in one video here, but this is stuff that I think is not only really interesting, but really important. I think personality and identity development is something that a lot of people who are in their teenage years, 20s, and even 30s really need to focus on, because if they are not the person that they believe they should be, then they should start maybe working on becoming that person. And then a lot of the times they'll find that if they work towards becoming that person, a lot of things in their life will become better and things will even out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your comments down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, let me know, give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more. Other than that, I do have personality sessions available at my website, asurasyke.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.